print and digital copies of all master's and postgraduate theses for the library, the editor of these theses and dissertation handbook, provides advice to format and binding of these print theses, and is the chair of our next session. Kia ora, Carol.
Thank you, Darren. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Ko Carol Brandenburg, tāku ingoa, no Aoraki Aho. As Darren said, my name is Carol Brandenburg. I'm the Acquisitions Librarian at Lincoln University, but also I'm here as a representative of Ngāi Ka Whakaho, and it is my honour to introduce Szekely in today's keynote speech for this morning, well, first keynote speech this morning. In your program book, it's described as a personal reflection on the changing library and information needs of Māori. I'm sure Chris will be building on his presentation yesterday, reflecting on the work from Te Aratika and Tūrupa Whakahau and LIANZA have done over the years. Hopefully he will not have as many embarrassing photos in this presentation. But thank you and welcome, Chris.
No photos and no PowerPoint, just me. O kia ora koutou, ka nui te hariko ki te mihi, kia koutou kua tai mai nei tēnei ata, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Titiro ki muri, kia whakatika amua. Look to the past, to proceed to the future. It seemed to me that this was a particularly appropriate whakatauki for LIANZA as it celebrates its centenary. Over the last couple of days, we've had the opportunity to look behind us and reflect on where we've come from, to laugh at some of the more frivolous moments, and to reflect on some of the people who are no longer with us, but on whose shoulders we stand. Look to the past, to proceed to the future. I'm going to look back to the 1990s, not so very long ago, through to the Te Aratika project, or my bit of the Te Aratika project, where I was the contracted researcher to go around New Zealand and ask Māori, what do you think of us? Do you like us? Are we all right? Could we do better? We identified a whole set of issues and concerns relating to Māori lack of engagement with libraries. As a profession, we were concerned that Māori were missing out. And what could we do about it? Turns out, though, that the issues we identified in the 90s were pretty much the same issues that had been identified 30 years earlier in 1963 by the Māori Services Library Committee. So the question is, are the issues still the same today? I suggest in this paper that in many instances, yes, they are. Has anything changed? My answer to that is also yes. Hence the paradox in the title of this paper, nothing has changed, but everything is different. What I would like to do this morning is recount the findings of the Te Aratika Guiding Voices research project that was conducted in the mid-90s and consider the extent to which some of the issues have remained with us and the extent to which there has been change. I make these observations based on my personal experiences over the last 10 years, a decade that covers my time as library manager at Manukau City, a city that was home to the country's largest population of Māori, through to my more recent experiences as Chief Librarian of the Alexander Turnbull Library. two very different libraries, but both with significant Māori relevance and interaction. So to begin, let's go back to the 1996, Te Te Roki Muri, and look at what Māori were telling us about their information needs, their views on libraries, and how libraries could better serve their needs. 14 years ago, I travelled the country and posed these questions to Māori at a number of hui. And those hui were held at Waimate North, it's up in Taitokarai, Auckland, Kirikiriroa, that's Hamilton, Wellington, Christchurch, and Invercargill. This was stage 2 of the Te Aratika project, a joint initiative of LIANZA and Te Rōpū Whakahau, a major push to try and find out how libraries could better engage with Māori. We so desperately wanted to do better. This stage of Te Aratika built on the excellent earlier research that Tui MacDonald had done in articulating the issues from the perspective of the library and information sector. Stage 2 sought to gain insights into the views of Māori, and hence the 1996 roadshow. The feedback I received was voluminous, but filtered down largely into 6 major categories of concern. Firstly, there were issues relating to intellectual access and information literacy. Māori was saying, we can't find the stuff. Your library systems don't make sense to us. I'm typing in the words that I use, but your catalogues aren't giving me anything back, and I know you've got stuff. Secondly, focusing on Māori youth as a priority was important, particularly in relation to print literacy. Put simply, it was important that young Māori know how to read and read well. And the view was that libraries could play a useful role in this regard. After all, books are what we do. Thirdly, there were issues relating to Māori staffing. The basic issue being that there just weren't enough Māori working in libraries. Fourth set of concerns was around the need or desire for Māori to have their own libraries. Fifth, and there were only 6, so it's not a list of 100, was the need to take libraries out to Māori communities and increase targeted promotion. And lastly, but by no means least, a whole bunch of concerns relating to intellectual property rights. How many of these issues are still with us today? I suggest that most of them. Most of them are with us to a greater or lesser degree. But that doesn't mean that things haven't changed, or that we as librarians have wasted effort, or that there hasn't been progress. Let's take a closer look. Firstly, to the issue of Māori working in libraries. Are there enough? No, there aren't. It begs the question of how many are there, and how many is enough? Well, the answer is that we don't really know exactly how many there are. What we do know is that Te Rōpū Whakahau, the Māori Library and Information Professionals Association, has gone from strength to strength since it was first established in 1992. It's amazing to think that in less than 2 years, the group will be celebrating our 20th anniversary with a return to the marae where it all started, and that was Waipapa Marae at Auckland University. Are there more Māori working in libraries now than there were nearly 20 years ago? We can really only guess, but my gut feeling is possibly not. My unscientific observation is that we have new Māori faces entering the profession, but we also have some turnover at the other end, either through people moving on into other jobs or just shuffling on, full stop. At its peak in the 90s, Te Rōpa Whakahau had around 150 paid-up members. And I still think that's amazing. I know when I started, you could count them on one hand, and then two hands, and then there were more and more. 150 paid-up members. And a whole lot more who hadn't paid up. Now, I don't know what the figure is today, but I suspect it's probably around the same. Perhaps with just as many, as always, not being up to date with their fees. The annual hui consistently attract around 70 delegates. And I think a reasonable guess is that there are probably around a couple of hundred of us all up in current practice. One of the things I personally like about Te Rōpa Whakahau hui a tau is that I don't know everyone anymore. In days gone by, one tended to know who and where the Māori were in libraries, and finding new faces was a cause of excitement. It was a bit like sighting kakapo in the wild. So it really is great that there are new and confident faces coming on board. I also think that we now have more depth of experience among those Māori working in the library profession, and certainly more who have undertaken professional library and information studies, either through the mainstream channels or through the Māori information management programs offered through Te Wānanga o Raukawa. On that note, the Māori graduates of the programs at Te Wānanga o Raukawa, Te Rōpa Whakahau was instrumental in helping to work with Te Wānanga to establish that program. Started off as a diploma in Māori information management, then went to a bachelor's, and I think we must be close to the master's now, I'm not sure. But I think there have been well over 100 Māori who have gone through those programs, and I wonder, where are they? Because by and large, they're not in libraries. Many of the individuals that went to those programs, I think, were sent, in some cases, by their marae, by their hapu, with a view to getting some skills that they could take back to the iwi in terms of helping to organise local archives and the taonga held within hapu and sometimes on marae. And that is a nice lead-in, really, to that whole notion which I mentioned earlier, where Māori were expressing that they'd like to have their own libraries. I also suggest that we now have more Māori working in libraries who have a greater confidence in their reo and tikanga and in their Māoriness than may have been the case 20 years ago. I remember at some of those hui, those early hui, where some Māori would come along and talk of the anguish of being the Māori face in the library, but really not having the knowledge about who they were personally, or any kind of knowledge around mātauranga Māori, although we didn't use that phrase back then. Certainly no reo Māori, and the sense of inadequacy that individuals had around that. And indeed that was one of the kaupapa, the founding kaupapa of Te Rōpa Whakahau, was to strengthen Māori in their cultural confidence as well as in their professional confidence. And I mihi to you, Darren, for acknowledging Te Rōpa Whakahau's presence at this conference and our attempt to use the reo no matter how confident or competent we are. There is also the question to consider of what kind of library positions are Māori working in. It used to be that most Māori working in libraries were in junior, unqualified positions. Again, my feeling is that this may have adjusted in a positive way, but it is still the case that with some notable exceptions, that there are very few Māori in senior professional positions. He tēnō moke moke a mātou. So to recap on this particular matter, while there may not be many more Māori working in libraries than there were once upon a time, my feeling is that there is a healthy rejuvenation, and those that are there are making a distinctive contribution. To the issue of focusing on Māori youth and the need to read. This is one of the issues that surfaced in 1963, and there were lots of good recommendations in that report, a couple of not so good ones too, like getting the old books from Pākehā households and giving them to the Māoris. In their wisdom, the Māori, well, we didn't do that. We sent them to the islands instead, I think. I think this issue of literacy, we'd all agree that it is of no lesser importance today than it was 40 years ago. Certainly, it was my observation at Manukau City that young Māori were using libraries in greater numbers. Particularly so when we introduced internet computers and learning centres. I started, I might as well say it. I remember when we were first talking about introducing our LearnNets into the libraries. And although our librarians, we were keen to have that technology there, we were also a little bit nervous because was it really real library work? Did we really go to library school and learn our professional practice in order to become technicians who would help push buttons? And what if people just came in just to use the computers and didn't borrow books? Well, those were the early days, and I think all of us have come a long way since then and know the importance of the role of technology and the internet to what we do. Many young people at Manukau were also using the libraries as a safe place for social engagement. And sometimes there just aren't that many safe places out there. And it was good that libraries could at least try and be safe for young people. The extent to which reading levels have improved across the board, I simply don't know. But I am aware that circulation of Māori materials, at Manukau libraries at least, continues to increase. And that's a positive indicator. Manukau Libraries is one of the few public libraries that has carried out longitudinal studies of Māori use and non-use of library services. Auckland City Libraries is another. The first of the Manukau studies was done in 1996, with 200 Māori residents participating in a door-to-door survey regarding the usage of non-usage of library services. Door-to-door surveys, gosh, don't really have those anymore, and probably, I think, for very good reason. The study was repeated in 2001, and finally, in 2006. I say finally because wouldn't it be a wonderful thing in 2011 for those two great giants, Manukau and Auckland, to do another study? Let's get 15 years worth of trends, not just 10. So anyway, for the first time, here was a library, Manukau Libraries, that had quantitative data over a 10-year period, and therefore the ability to identify and track trends in Māori usage of the library, along with attitudinal change. What we found that was while Māori library membership was tracking downwards, the increased frequency of library visits was such a feature in the 2001 survey had been sustained. So basically, there was more Māori usage of library services in-house. Interestingly, where Māori had expressed a strong desire to see more Māori material in libraries back in 1996, by 2006, they were saying, oh, well, actually, it's not just Māori material we need and want. Our information needs are as broad as anybody else's. We just need to be able to find and get the stuff. The other feature of the survey that was hardly surprising was exponentially increased access to the internet, because hardly any of that was going on in 1996. But by 2006, well, it was all about that. The survey also inquired, and this was a new set of questions that had been introduced in the 2006 questionnaire, how many Māori households had internet in the home. And I think it was around the 45-50% mark, which we thought was pretty good. Because those that didn't, where could they get access? Well, they could just go down to a Manukau library and jump on the net. Back to the issue of focusing on young people and literacy. It is interesting, if a little spooky, to note that the graduates of the Kohangarea and Kura Kaupapa Māori programs of the 1980s are now parents themselves, with their own children in Māori language immersion education. We know that there is a critical mass of Māori that can kōrero Māori as a result, and while it's too early to be complacent about the future of the Māori language as a living language, the situation doesn't seem so bleak as it was 20 years ago. That's a positive change, although the ongoing scarcity of printed material in te reo Māori at the younger level is an ongoing frustration. So some things change and some things don't. The availability of written Māori is an area where I think libraries, such as the Alexander Turnbull Library, have a real role to play. And I'm talking in general terms here, beyond the focus on material for young people. The greatest corpus of written te reo in both published and unpublished formats resides with us, the Turnbull Library. And we have a responsibility and a desire to make it available. In 2005, excuse me. In 2005, the Turnbull published a comprehensive annotated bibliography. A bibliography of its extensive holdings of the 19th century books in Māori, collated by Phil Parkinson, Dr. Phil Parkinson, and Penny Griffith. The book duly went on to win the LIANZA John Harris Prize in 2007. The book was hardly a bestseller, but the library has been steadily upgrading its online catalogue records of this material based on the bibliography. So there is a greater possibility of this material being surfaced and researched. The big push here, though, really has to be in the area of digitisation. Digitising from the vast amount of te reo Māori material we hold in Turnbull collections in both published and unpublished formats is a must. In this respect, We made a good start in 2008 with the transcription and digitisation of around 3,000 letters in the Māori language as part of the Maclean's digitisation project. We have yet to do a formal evaluation of the extent to which this material is being mined online, but the early feedback was good in terms of the usability of the manuscript's website. Increasing the amount of te reo material.
Phone.
I paused because it sounded like mine. Increasing the amount of te reo material that is digitised and made available online is a cornerstone of the National Library's Bicultural Implementation Plan that was released earlier this year. And we were very pleased to recruit somebody recently, in fact just last week, who will work with us to identify and prioritise more Māori language material for digitisation. Next week, I will be announcing a new structure for the Turnbull Library. The most significant restructure the library has had in some 30 years. And I'm here. I'll get on to writing that change document, Penny, I swear. One of the features of that structure will be not one, but 3 new positions dedicated to researching, describing and making accessible the considerable Māori material held at the Alexander Turnbull Library. We are expecting to make a quantum step forward in this area, and I personally, and I know many of the staff at the Turnbull Library, are very excited about that. Now to the matter of information literacy and the ability of Māori to find what they want using our systems. Remember that Māori was saying, I'm typing in the words I use, but your blasted catalogues, I say blasted, catalogues, aren't giving me back what I need. And I know you've got the stuff. Our response to that as a profession was to get serious about the creation and use of Māori subject headings. It's been a long, hard road, but we're still on it, and I think we're making good progress. I think one of the success stories of the past few years has been the tripartite collaboration between Te Rōpa Whakahau, LIANZA and the National Library. I suspect that this was one of the kaupapa that Penny was referring to when she mentioned yesterday the almost indecent haste with which LIANZA presidentials Lisa Toka and Merla Edmondson found their ways to Penny's door as newly appointed National Librarian. And how could Penny possibly say no to such a proposition? While we don't really know at this point the extent to which Māori subject headings are actually making a difference in helping Māori to find what they need, we do know that spin-offs such as the iwi hapu names list are proving useful in a wider sphere. Who would have thought that libraries would be the authoritative list of iwi? And we're a little bit uncomfortable about that, but it seems the lists we've got and have worked up are the best around. But what else has changed in this regard? Well, the internet became more pervasive in all our lives and technology more accessible. The digital divide, though not completely closed, has narrowed considerably. This was evident in Manukau. Oh, and Google came along and changed the way that Joe Blogs got information. Any information. Now, whether you're searching for whakapapa or searching for porn, you just type your words in the box and you get a result. Is it a quality result? Not necessarily, but that doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. But the point I'm making here, specific to this discussion, is that people's attitudes about finding stuff and finding information changed. It was something now that anybody can do. You just type your words in the box and the stuff comes back. It's not something that nerdy people do or those that know the system know how to do. It's something that is ubiquitous to us. And that is a wonderful thing in the way that people are thinking about information and their rights to getting it. And I contend that that has certainly been the case for Māori, young Māori in particular, and male to boot. I seem to recall that the results of the most recent World Internet Survey for New Zealand, it's a little bit like World Famous in New Zealand, but it was the World Internet Survey for New Zealand, tells us that Māori and Pacific men under the age of 25 are the fastest growing group of internet users in this country. Boys and their toys. Turned out that all we needed to do to engage that hardest group of all in the information age was throw in a few gadgets. How could we have not seen that? So what else has changed? Treaty claims. Treaty claims, hundreds of them, are being settled. And here I would like to talk a little to the issue of intellectual property rights and the notion of mātauranga Māori. The very claims that drove Māori into our research libraries as uncertain and uncomfortable and inexperienced users 25 years ago are now beginning to be resolved and settled. And that is making a real difference for Māori at an iwi level. Earlier this year, I attended the Te Ropa Whakahau Hui Atau in Akaroa. God, we go to some awful places at these hui. Took myself along to Akaroa, I thought, oh, I'll go there. Kerereu all over the place. Many of the sessions at that hui were presented by Ngāi Tahu, who, as we know, were one of the first major iwi to have their treaty claims settled. And that's going back a few years now. The use that Ngāi Tahu are making of information technology is impressive, as evidenced in initiatives such as Project Kereru. And I hope I live long enough where it's okay to eat kereru, because that's the whole reason of getting them back. And the GIS field mapping of sites of tribal significance. Ngāi Tahu are building up extraordinary information resources on their own terms and for their own purposes. They've got their own library and it's working for them. From what I could see, the Ngāi Tahu Treaty settlement had indeed served to provide the iwi with the necessary resources to build an infrastructure that supports the tribe's social, cultural and economic aspirations. What I saw at the Akaroa hui were young guys, all university graduates who were confident and enthusiastic about the future of their iwi, their place within it and their contribution to it. And boy, is that way different to where things were at back in the 80s and 90s. I'm sure we'll hear all more about that later this morning when we get to Tahu Pōtiki's presentation. Over the past year, in my statutory role of Chief Librarian of the Alexander Turnbull Library, a role I look forward to continuing for many years to come, finally get to that blasted job. I've been involved in the settlement process for the Ngāti Porou Treaty claim. All those Ngātis. So many of them who entered the library profession went back to their iwi and told the iwi all about us. The small but significant part of the settlement that I have been involved in is a letter of commitment relating to the care, management, development, access and use of Ngāti Porou taonga held in the National Library, Archives New Zealand and Te Papa Tongarewa. The deed of settlement is expected to be signed in a couple of weeks, so I won't go into explicit detail of what the document contains. But actually, perhaps I will. Here are some of the phrases from that document, and I feel I can share this because the document has been taken around the East Coast and shared and consulted with Ngāti Porou, so it's hardly confidential. What we have made explicit in the context of this letter of commitment are statements around the significance of Ngāti Porou taonga held in our institutions to the maintenance and development of Ngāti Porou culture and to enriching the cultural life of New Zealand. Ngāti Porou can be enriched by the taonga that we have, and in turn New Zealand can be enriched. That's what that statement is saying. Ngāti Porou taonga is of course held and looked after by Ngāti Porou whānau and hapu as well as Crown. Ngāti Porou's cultural and spiritual authority in relation to Ngāti Porou's taonga rests of course with Ngāti Porou. Here's an interesting one, that innovative and technological solutions are required to provide opportunities for Ngāti Porou's youthful population and the over 80% of the Ngāti Porou population who are living outside the traditional tribal rohe, to connect with Ngāti Porou culture identity. So getting Ngāti Porou material online is what Ngāti Porou are saying. Their vision. The vision is intended, here it is, ngā taonga tuku iho o ngā Ngāti Porou. Ngāti Porou taonga, an enduring legacy in perpetuity. I put that in from the Turnbull. For Ngāti Porou. This vision is intended to facilitate access to Ngāti Porou taonga and their care and management, use, development and revitalisation. The basis for this vision for the future is to contribute positively towards a situation where Ngāti Porou culture, heritage, language is thriving. Members have a clear sense of their identity, history, traditions and language, and contemporary Ngāti Porou arts and culture continue to emerge. And we're going to be part of that in libraries because Ngāti Porou want us there. Ngāti Porou history is well documented and easy to discover and access by Ngāti Porou members, New Zealanders and a global audience. And Ngāti Porou members are actively interacting and adding to Ngāti Porou content. Here's an interesting one. Ngāti Porou, I was going to tell you about this, Penny, I will next week. Ngāti Porou are able to exercise appropriate authority over Ngāti Porou taonga, recognising the authority that the respective Crown parties, in our case, National Library, exercise under statute. So we have a shared authority over Ngāti Porou taonga. Goodness, what's that going to mean? So anyway, we're going to be signing this letter of commitment, and it is a really big deal. You know, it took 18 months to hammer that out. And I should say it wasn't hammering it out, actually. It was sitting around a table and forming a relationship. And the relationship was being formed just as much between the National Library, Archives New Zealand and Te Papa Tongarewa as it was with ourselves as Crown agencies working with Ngāti Porou. So the idea is that we have this letter of commitment, but what makes it real and tangible is that within a year of signing this letter of commitment, we have to sit down with Ngāti Porou and work out annual work plans. So real things. In those work plans, Ngāti Porou have said they'd like to see the following things in their relationship with us as National Library. And some of these are distinctive to us. It's distinct from Te Papatongarewa and Archives New Zealand. Firstly, collaborative care and management of taonga. To work with Ngāti Porou to develop processes to record what material relating to Ngāti Porou taonga is being accessed from the collections. So Ngāti Porou know that people are researching the Ngāti Porou material, but what material is actually being researched. To work with Ngāti Porou to develop protocols concerning use of and access to material relating to Ngāti Porou taonga. Thank you. Ngāti Porou were keen to know who is accessing the material. And that was the line that I decided we needed to draw. Because in our professional philosophy, our ethics as librarianship, everybody has the right of access. There's a privacy thing there. I understood Ngāti Porou's desire to want to know who is looking at Ngāti Porou material. And they talked, and there were tears when we were discussing this, about what Ngāti Porou saw as misleading untruths, histories that were shaky, that had been based on the mātauranga Māori that largely Pākehā researchers had used over the many years. And they were not comfortable with that. So I understood the desire. One solution or one starting point for us might be to offer researchers who are researching Ngāti Porou material the opportunity to make their presence and their research projects known to Ngāti Porou. And we can help facilitate that as a library, and why wouldn't we? And I know that a lot of researchers would love that opportunity to get those introductions into iwi. Ngāti Porou want to develop exhibition opportunities relating to Ngāti Porou taonga, both on-site in the National Library's gallery, but also around outside of the National Library's Wellington location. And this one here, to provide Ngāti Porou the opportunity to share their mātauranga regarding key activities and events at National Library. I think it's fantastic. And when I started to work on this, I felt this is why I'm here. Waited all this time for this opportunity. You know, we went around the island and 6 different hui and asked Maro, what do you want? Well, we've got through the treaty claims process, we've got iwi telling us this is what we want. And it's not we want our stuff back. What it is we want to have a strong and confident future, and you can be part of that with us. What a fantastic message that is. What a fantastic message that is. Now, the letter of commitment that we have worked on with Ngāti Porou, took 18 months, really is now an exemplar. Other iwi know about this letter of commitment, and they want no less than what Ngāti Porou have got. And good on them. And boy, I tell you, I won't give you the names, but they're lining up at the door, and I can't wait. This really is what we've been waiting for. Māori coming to us strong and confident and telling us, here's your place in our future. Now, mātauranga Māori, in the National Library Act 2003, when that was changed, for the first time, I think, in any legislation, New Zealand legislation, that phrase, mātauranga Māori, was in an act, and it was in the National Library Act. Heck, what is it? I stand here today before you to say, I don't know. And if I don't know, do you know? What I do know is that I've got enough wherewithal, enough resources, enough colleagues, enough whānau to help me develop a working, dynamic definition of what Mātauranga Māori is and what it can mean in a library's context. There's no one definition of what Mātauranga Māori is. It's lots of things. And I admire LIANZA's aspiration and efforts to embed an understanding of Mātauranga Māori within our professional body of knowledge. Bok 11. And I mihi te tiropa whakahau, who working with LIANZA, I think, when was it, last week? Somewhere north of Wellington, there was this first professional development hui for librarians to go along and learn about Mātauranga Māori. I think it was our practice run. We've been developing these programs. And we think within Te Rōpa Whakahau, this can be our contribution to working within the library profession to help us all understand what Mātauranga Māori can mean for us. I don't think it's going to be perfect, and I know some of us, and I'm not sure if you are still registered, Sue. Because I've got a feeling my deadline's coming up, and I'm shivering in my boots, because where in my work journal have I got Mātauranga Māori? Well, I'll work on something, I suppose, and I'll share my working with you, Sue, so that we continue to maintain our registration. But good on us, librarians in New Zealand, and good on us because we want our registration to be recognised internationally. And we like to think that we've got an opportunity here to lead internationally and encourage other library associations to take on board that there isn't just one paradigm around information systems and what knowledge is about. There are numerous paradigms, and some of those paradigms are indigenous. That's a wonderful thing. So, to conclude, 1996, I travelled around New Zealand on behalf of LIANZA and Te Rōpa Whakahau, asking Māori what their information needs were and how libraries could better serve them. Fast forward into the new millennium, and we hear a stronger, more confident and more explicit iwi voice emerging in the context of treaty settlements. I believe that the shifting nuance in this voice is one that we should be excited about for all the right reasons. This is the moment we've been waiting for. Iwi are beginning to tell us how libraries and archives can participate in helping to meet Māori aspirations on Māori terms. My great colleague and friend Charles Te Ahukaramu Royal talks about a time when iwi will move beyond the notion of grievance and redress and into a state of creative enterprise. A state where we can leverage the knowledge of our ancestors in ways that enrich and sustain our spirit and life force and ensure our social, economic and cultural well-being. How wonderful it is that iwi are giving libraries a chance to be a part of that. Te hokinga mai, tēnā koutou. Tangi ana te ngakau, I te aroha. Tūtonura, te mana te ihi, o ngā tupuna kua wehe atura. Mauria mai, te Māori tangata. He oranga mo te more tangi mo kai nei. E rapu ana e te ara tika mo tā tō katoa. Nothing has changed, but everything is different. Kia ora.